prepared for this segment of this chapter here, I went out looking for subsidiaries and exactly what does that mean. Here's an interesting chart, and yes, it's a little bit blurry over here. I encourage you if this topic really interests you, and it really needs to interest you, especially if your company is out there and you go pay attention to your competitors. If you look on things like Volkswagen, BMW, Ford, it's incredible as to how many different ways they connect or create subsidiaries or have connectivity as they go through. One of the most fascinating parts about, especially today, the automotive industry is the vast scramble into the electric vehicle mode and the autonomous vehicle mode as you go through. Massive partnerships in billions of dollars measured to umpteen billions on top of that as you go through with new product markets and everything else. You'll see General Motors out there buying battery plants as you go through bringing old plants they closed years ago out of the mothballs and converting them into electric vehicle manufacturing as they go through. You'll see Ford partnering with the companies as they go through that didn't even exist 5 years ago, and all of a sudden they're tossing in 1.6 partnership with the company and buying a board seat there to make certain that they can sit down and grab a market share as they go through and maybe have a foothold for times later as you go through. I encourage you to go research this, especially if you're looking for work. Sometimes you can sit down and end up in one company and end up in another one as you go through a buyout and a merger. I have a friend of mine, I needed to have some legal advice in the area of music as he went through. So I says, okay, I need to have a releases for this over here in the process. Well, his daughter actually works now at Lionsgate Film. So by the time it was all done, she sat down there as a law student. She worked as an intern for a law firm for free. After she passed her bar, they hired her as a full-timer. She sat down there, that company got bought out, and that company got bought out. And by the time it was all done, by the ripe old age of 36-year-old, she finds that she looks around and she's a VP over at Lionsgate Films. Like an incredible lurch, but it really happened because she got connections by being an unpaid intern, but then all the process of you buying people out and all this connectivity in the process of the different shareholders and everything else buying different companies, all of a sudden she finds herself in a major filmmaker in a major position as they go through because of the fact she sat there and paid attention to this concept here of subsidiaries and the connectivity that can happen between them. Sometimes the size and the age of the international corporation, by the time you're all done, you have different kinds of experienced executives, and they'll serve abroad and have a lot of knowledge of the company policies, and they'll have a lot of confidence with international activities. Sometimes you put somebody who has almost no experience, they may been in a corporate office for a couple of decades, and you put them in the middle of a country they have no experience with, and they're totally befuddled because of the fact that they know their work, but they don't know how their work fits into the context of this totally chaotic environment or the chaotic country where all of a sudden some old seasoned veteran in the same geographical area, they walk in a matter of a few weeks, all of a sudden everything calms down, and the person that's supposed to be in charge sits or looks around and say, how did this happen? Well, because they didn't know the context of the company in that particular market or that particular country as you go through. So you'll see a lot of the old hands that are used to the international work, they come in, and it's just that whole aspect of experience. What they say about experience, 10,000 hours makes you an expert in the field. That being said, 10,000 hours, if you sit down there and figure out work year is 2,080 hours, that's 52 weeks times 40 hours a week, 2,080 hours, and then sit there divided at 10,000 hours, 5 years of experience makes you an expert in that particular job or that particular field. If you sat down there and worked in a different country for 5 years, even if it was in different jobs, that culture part will become second nature to you, and it'll be much easier to go through and navigate some of the different cultural differences and actually get something done rather than somebody coming in who may have a high power position, high power knowledge, high power expertise, and they have no idea how to sit down there and survive in that particular culture because it's so different from where they were before. So a lot of times, your larger international corporations, more decisions are made at headquarters because of the seasoning of your workforce in that process you go through. A lot of times, if the headquarters, if that really is where the central power of it is, they'll bounce production factors from one country to another to gain a financial competitive advantage. A lot of times, you're looking now at China. China really has been a place where we shipped a lot of manufacturing to in the United States to because of the low cost of labor. But now China has an emerging middle class. So all of a sudden, between that and all the different aspects of tariffs, they bounced up out of China, went to Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Vietnam, although they can't handle the capacity because the population isn't there, and also the manufacturing expertise isn't there as well. But they do have a much lower paying workforce. So, hey, let's move out of China. Let's go over here, over here, and over here. And all of a sudden, China's sitting there with empty buildings, and manufacturing moved out from the international corporations. And then you have a supply chain issue over here. Well, instead of going through this port over here in Hong Kong, let's ship everything down to Brazil and ship it up from Brazil, because of the fact that Brazil, we have a close partnership between the US and Brazil versus the US versus China. Let's just go through a different pathway. Yes, those things happen, and they can happen just like that if the headquarters makes that decision as you go through. The headquarters may not even care about the chaos they cause in that particular region geographically, or that SBU in the process, because they just made the decision, we need to go by cost upon money as you go through. Sometimes one market's too small because the economies of scale. You need to sit down and get really 17 containers of 10,000 shirts on a ship over here as fast as you can. Let's sit down and think about the aspect of flying them in rather than ships, because there's so many ships backed up in the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. So boom, all of a sudden you make that decision. And yes, it costs more in the short term, but the fact you have product on the shelves in the long term means you grab more market share. Sometimes the decisions need to take place, sometimes quickly, and sometimes you're better off being done in the headquarters rather than in the region itself, as they struggle to get by the local red tape. Price and profit, a lot of times it's decided by HQ instead of the subsidiary as they went out in the process, or the SBU. Sometimes they want to have the subsidiaries motivated and loyal, except for the fact when they undercut their decisions, they become disloyal and disenfranchised in their process. You have headquarters should delegate decisions as reasonably as possible, but then they come in on the major ones and boom, that happens. But you'll have that argument in almost every organization as you go through. Let's see, we make better decisions because we're the ones in charge at HQ or district as you go through. And you people out over there, you need to listen to what I have to say. But the people here, wait a minute, I have an idea. These are my customers. I know more about them than you do. That's okay, because you want you over here, but you need to be loyal. But I'm trying to be loyal to my customers at the same time. You have that argument, and it's going to happen no matter what happens. It's going to happen even in a domestic corporation as well, as a constant dialogue that you have going on in business all the time as you go through. Here's the thing, should really, by the time you're done, should a company be allowed to profit from international transfer pricing? That's another aspect that you can't see if you're working in an SBU, especially an SBU that's geographically based, really focusing in on a specific region rather than the big picture as you go through. I'll let you take a look at that on your own. So a lot of times the shareholders outside of the international corporation, they control the affiliate, they can block the international corporation headquarters to move production factors away. And really, a true international corporation, when you go into a country, you really should have the people in that geographical area hire the people in your management in that country. And also, to fit the definition of international corporation, you should be selling shares of stock in that subsidiary on their market as well. So you may have people on the board in that particular subsidiary blocking the efforts of international corporation to move productions away or fill an order from another affiliate in the process. You may have that internal politics that you go through and have difficulty. Sometimes there's very little ownership. So the ownership issue really comes down to who's in charge and who has the most voting stock as you go through in the process. So reporting, a lot of times you have 4 different kinds: financial, technological, market, and political as you go through. The older ICs rely on headquarters more, where the younger ICs can often be more nimble as they go through. Often headquarters make decisions for subsidiaries, but really large-scale internal competition for resources is common in any international corporation. And by the way, it's also common anytime you have multiple different entities in a domestic corporation. It doesn't matter. The internal competition for resources is common in any organization that you'll work in. That being said, take care.